I'd like to get started and introduce Scott Noon, who is the Vice President of Market and Development at Teachscape. Scott, are you on the line?
Sure am. Can you hear me okay, Corinne?
I can, and I hope all of our participants can. Also, if you're having any trouble, again, you can type into the chat box and we'll try and help you. Thanks, Scott.
Very good. Thanks for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here to share with everyone today. I have a number of slides, and I'm going to move through them fairly rapidly, so I'm hopeful that the broadband connection will refresh quickly enough that we can meet our goal of a brief presentation and plenty of time for Q&A. As you're all aware, it's really important that we continue to raise the bar on observations. After the New Teacher Project study called the Widget Effect identified that there was a great deal of difficulty with teacher evaluation. There have been a lot of reactions around the country, including a great deal of policy, as mentioned by the National NCTE that released a study again just yesterday. So it's what makes for effective observers. So from Teachscape's perspective, our experience comes largely from the Measures of Effective Teaching study, which was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And our work was to collect videos of teacher performance, 27,000 hours of it across the United States over an 18-month period of time, and scored against between 3 and 5 different rubrics. And so in order to do that, we had to train people on a wide variety of rubrics, as well as ensure that they understood the frameworks, that they could score reliably using the frameworks, calibrate their day-to-day performance, and avoid reader drift over time. And so we've been doing this at scale for about 2.5 years now with a very large audience, all done via the internet. So it's those experiences that have shaped the resources and the materials that I'm going to share with you today. So observers need to understand their framework well. They really need to understand the concepts behind the framework, but also the various performance levels that are native to that framework. They also need to be able to distinguish between evidence and interpretation. So many principals and other observers are still look at classrooms and interpret intentions or interpret motives to the behaviors that they see, but it's important to be able to teach more of a scientific approach to collecting evidence against the framework. The evidence has to be accurately scored and tied to the framework, and again, bias is a big problem that folks should address. So I always give the example with bias that for me, I love technology-rich lessons. I'm a bit of a geek, and so I love very technology-rich lessons where teachers have taken the energy and time to use the internet or other kinds of technologies to give kids hands-on real-world experiences. And for me, when scoring teachers, that's a very positive bias that may not necessarily reflect actual performance. So as districts and states consider observations and evaluation criteria, programs need to have reliability. In other words, can we make sure that all of the observers who are looking at teachers would score that teacher in the same way? We need to have consistency of evaluation from room to room. It needs to be fair. How do we reduce bias? How do we test out a bit of that? How easy it is for a principal who knows who his strong teachers are, her strong teachers are, and walks into that classroom with a bias towards giving it a high score when it may not necessarily deserve one today. And so addressing bias is a really important thing. And validity is that the framework is proven to actually measure that which it's supposed to measure. In other words, does a framework that you've selected actually measure exceptional teaching or not? And if so, does it tie to the kinds of outcomes, whether it's student data or other kinds of student performance that you are trying to measure? So in order to get this to work, for us, our approach is that we believe this is involved an extensive amount of training in the frameworks, but opportunities to practice the scoring process and get feedback on how you did scoring, and an assessment which is backed by expertise and research. So far, Teachscape has undertaken one such system on the commercial scale, and it's called the Framework for Teaching Proficiency System. We have built this technology, by the way, in an open framework system so that we can reuse the videos, we can reuse the modules, we can reuse much of the technology, so that if a state or a district came to us and said, we really want to test our raters, but we want to use a very different framework, can you do that? The engine exists to allow us to contour this to any particular framework as well. But as a commercial product, Teachscape has released this framework for teaching proficiency system due largely to the mass market of users that are using the Danielson framework for teaching. Again, this all evolved from our collaboration together with ETS, the Danielson Group, Charlotte herself, and a number of others on the MET project. As a result, though, we built an entirely new system built on that experience so that we were able to create this new proficiency system for you. The proficiency system has three key factors. So you'll see our bias here in our approach to rater proficiency and consistency. It has three parts to the training. One is the observer training and a bit of teacher orientation. The second area is the scoring practice center, and the third is that proficiency test itself. So how much training is often asked? And for us, it's about 21 hours of training content across a dozen online learning modules with about 100 different master scored videos. We believe the training is really essential to be very video rich, in that it's necessary for raters to be able to sit in the same room or sit with the same content and to be able to look at lots of examples of practice and begin to have conversation with one another or collaborate with one another around the learning of that framework and how it's to be scored. And that builds the inter-rater reliability in the process. It begins with three introductory modules. One is an introduction to what does it mean to be an evaluator, and how do you collect evidence versus interpretive comments. We have an introduction to the technology itself with the scoring tools and so forth, and a whole piece of training on bias training. There are 8 modules then digging into the observable elements of the framework. One of the difficulties that you may run into is you have a framework that you're using in your state that has 50 or 60 observable elements. It is going to be a big challenge to identify enough video and to score and train on all of those various aspects. One of the nice pieces of the Danielson model, in addition to being the only validated framework as a whole, is that there are only 8 modules that you have to cover in observation training. Also, again, it's really important because a number of the teachers' unions that I've spoken to around the country, and I had the pleasure of presenting to the Massachusetts Teachers Association and the other units of the NEA and AFT, one of the big issues is teachers want to be highly proficient in understanding the frameworks by which they'll be evaluated as well. And so having tools for not just observers, but also for the teachers themselves is a very useful part of a process that states and districts should consider. In the Danielson framework, for those of you who are familiar with it, there are 4 domains and a number of components, 22 components underneath of it. And in the domain 2 and 3, these are the observable areas, and Charlotte's selected 2A through D and 3A through D for observation training. There's a challenge in observing physical space and demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness, in that organizing physical space, you may not have seen the shape the room was in prior to the lesson, and so you can't You can't really know if the teacher, for example, has restructured the classroom. And E, demonstrating flexibility is a variance against the original proposed lesson plan. So again, you may not see that unless it's you used a pre-observation form where the teacher submitted the lesson plan in advance, and you can identify the changes that the teachers made. So the bulk of the observation is done with 2A through D and 3A through D, with the remaining elements of the Danielson framework as seen as quote-unquote off stage. The training continues by digging in on the various components. Charlotte, in her workshops, we've tried to create some very interactive exercises, and one of the ones that Charlotte's team often does in the training is to use the framework and the elements of the framework to introduce, in this case, the component, the establishing a culture for learning, and asking principals to pull out a highlighter and to highlight the words inside the rubrics that give the evaluator clues as to what to look for. And so some of those kinds of activities have been included. Under each of the components of the framework for teaching, Charlotte, as a result of the 2011 copyright, if you haven't seen the latest version, it's downloadable from her website. But there has been significant change since the 2007 book that ASCD published. And one of the critical changes has been this critical attribute. In order to make the rubric, the framework for teaching rubric, tighter for evaluation, because it was never really intended back in 2007 to be an evaluation tool. It was designed more for professional learning. But as a result of the measures of effective teaching study, Charlotte tightened the language and has added critical attributes and possible examples for each component of the framework. So as you're training on each rubric, for basic, for ineffective, basic, proficient, and distinguished, each of the rubric elements contains critical attributes and examples now, which make it easier and more clear to the evaluator in order to be precise in the selection. So for those of you who are going to elect to develop your own rubrics, these are two things that I believe you'll find as good advice, is to add critical attributes and potential examples. Now, in order to do the training, we have collected several hundred videos, and we use video to train the evaluators very carefully. And so we show videos of what does it mean to be proficient in establishing a culture for learning. And so in this particular case, you see here an example, a screenshot where there are two videos that you can click to that let you see what proficiency means. And then we show rangefinder videos in order to promote accuracy. So this is what a high 3 looks like and a low 3 looks like. And so for each component of the framework, you'll see there are 2 videos on proficient, a high and a low. It's 4 total. Under 2 for basic, you'll see 2 on basic and high and low. You'll see ineffective 1 and a high 1, distinguished and a low 4. So you've got on benchmark and rangefinder videos for every element of the training. So that's the training piece, again, about 21 hours across 12 different online modules. The second part of the framework for teaching proficiency system is a scoring practice area. So now, instead of learning about the framework elements individually, the tools that we've created allow users to practice scoring holistically, so that you're actually looking at whole videos, scoring on all observable elements of the frame, all observable components of the framework at the exact same time. So the videos are broken up by grade bands, which are consistent with the kinds of classrooms that a principal might or an observer might run into. So if you're a principal of an elementary school, it's K-5. There's 6-8 for middle school, 9-12 for high school people. If you have a principal of a K-8 school, and some just need our district specialists or others that need to be certified across K-12. And so practice videos cover those. You'll see here that what we do is we provide a panoramic video. There is here in the center a place to type in your evidence. Evidence is aligned to elements of the framework, so the same process we use for doing video or for in-person observation. So you collect evidence. Evidence is aligned to the framework. You score this particular video, and the tool allows you to get expert feedback. So here, after I've completed the scoring practice in the practice center, you'll see videos that say, all right, here's creating an environment respect and rapport. You scored it a 3. The master score scored it a 2. Your score is too high. Patterns of classroom interactions, both between the teacher and the students and among students, are generally appropriate but may reflect occasional inconsistencies, favoritism, and disregard for student ages. So there are a number of factors. So you get very detailed feedback on your score as compared to the master score. And as Charlotte likes to say, it's appropriate that you get the right score, but you also get the right score for the right reason. So we try to support that as much as possible. The proficiency test. So this is the third part of the package of services that we offer. So training is 1, scoring practice is 2, and 3 is the proficiency test itself. We believe this is the only observer's assessment that's currently available in the market. It's 7.5 hours long, which some people look at and go, whoa. But 7.5 hours with 2 pass-fail stages. So the first assessment is typically 3.5 hours long. A person seated take this part of the exam and then can take the second part later, depending on how you did in the first one. It's designed with both multiple choice and video scoring in that exam. The purpose, again, of the goal, and we can't make any claims yet about validity or reliability of the measures yet, but the goal has been to develop an assessment that will give districts some level of confidence that around 0.8 level of reliability. So we will continue to measure early adopters of this product, check out performance, and to study it to make sure that any claims we make in the future are accurate. But our goal, like I said, is about 80% inter-rater reliability. So that as any group of principals see and observe classrooms that with an 80% or 0.8 accuracy, you're going to get consistent feedback from everybody who observes. It covers a variety of content areas: language arts, math, science, social studies, and again across the grade bands. And there are 2 test versions, 2 forms for each grade band. If you pass the first test, you can simply move on to the second half, or you can do it later. If you if you fail the first half, then it gives you a limited amount of performance feedback, whether you should look into learning more about specific elements of the framework itself, or whether you're having trouble scoring the video as a whole. So as a result, it's a pretty robust and well-designed assessment of performance. Why is it important that we have such a robust test? Well, it's obviously high stakes. Teachers are careers depend on this. They're going to get tenure or they're not tenured based on observation. As we move into pay performance, it means, do I get a raise, do I not get a raise, or do I get an increase or some kind of incentive right now? So we want to make sure that this is a fair and reliable process. The other issue is, of course, in order to make the test fair and reliable, is the only way to do that would be to create an enormously long test where you have an infinite number of items to make sure that observers are highly, highly, highly consistent. But so by adding multiple choice, in addition to the video elements, we were able to increase and optimize the reliability without adding to the test length. I just thought I'd share with you some additional tools that go with this. So one of those is Reflect Live, and Reflect Live is a tool that can be used on an iPad or any laptop or any tablet kind of device, and it's designed to be there for observers as they're actually doing observations in the classroom. Because we believe that rather than just doing this with a yellow pad, that by having a technology system that requires alignment to the framework, this promotes accuracy, and if principals have tools that allow them to do real-time observations and to score them in an efficient way that's not massively time-consuming, this will help them increase the frequency by which they conduct observations. Many of the principals that we've worked with around the country have said, I'm just really frightened. I know how much time I used to spend just doing one for most of my teachers. Now I've got to do multiple observations for my new teachers and at least one or two for every other teacher I've got. And so having tools to allow them to do this efficiently works. And so these are some tools that we've created based on our learning of how to do mass observation, to do observation at scale in a timely way in order to meet budget and cost requirements. And again, it also demonstrates our perspective that we do this with teachers and not to teachers. And so observations need to be really collaborative reflection opportunities, principals and teachers reflecting together about the quality of instruction. Here's an example also. We begin by establishing a new observation. I put in the name of my teacher, name the observation. In a formal observation, you might want to connect to pre-observation or post-observation forms. But it certainly is a best practice to collect lesson artifacts, samples of student work, and ask the teacher also to participate in the process by conducting a self-review. Most evaluations are done to teachers. Principal says, I'm coming, the time is set, the observation happens, the principal writes up all of the things that he or she sees, and teachers know that eventually in the post-conference, the principal will stop talking and the evaluation is over. In this case, it's really designed to get a collaboration between an observer and a teacher who is observed in order to talk about and reflect on the practice that's happening, to get real growth out of the evaluation process. The evaluation begins by selecting the element of the framework against which you would like to score the teacher. And then the principal or observer sits in the room and can collect evidence by simply typing in the Add Notes Here section. You can type the evidence that's in there. You'll notice there's some unbiased evidence collected here before. Students started on board work without instruction from the teacher prior to the bell. Teacher asked, how does this compare with the story we reviewed yesterday, which demonstrated a higher order thinking skill? Teacher said to a student, this is really important and it's going to move everyone's thinking forward. So these are examples, and then they are tied to the elements of the framework to which they're appropriate. At the end, each element of the framework is scored one at a time with the relevant evidence appearing, and then this allows me to give teacher a mark. Also, you'll notice here that there are, you can follow the little shiny dots that I'm putting on the screen. Those are the critical attributes under unsatisfactory. So you can also run a critical attributes report if you want to take a look at that. This is a way to help users, again, score more efficiently. And finally, in the end, what we see is we see a teacher score and a principal score side by side. And in every case, we've had the principal scores higher than the teacher does. But it's a very good process to have teachers self-score, to review the observation artifacts and the evidence that was collected, and to reflect on the process. And then in the post-meeting, do the recommendations, explore areas of strength, and provide the overall rating. So we think these tools can help districts be very successful. We have a number of districts, but probably most notably the City of New York, who wants to be certain that principals are scoring effectively. And so they are also using some of our video tools to collect video evidence. And this can be used then for second scoring or for calibration monitoring of principals who are giving scores. So you can score the video while you're in the classroom, score the lesson while you're in the classroom and collect video as well, or just do some of your observations by video so that we can see the scores that you're giving and double check and make sure that we're getting rater accuracy. So adding in the video can be a very important process that allows us to continue to collaborate on making sure that everyone is being observed fairly and reliably. So some of the lessons that we've learned at Teachscape, just as kind of highlight checkpoints to share. New York State has been the first one to require certification of observers, and we think this will actually be a trend. I've talked to folks in other state departments of education. They're certainly leaning in this direction. Given the high stakes that are involved, it seems to be a strong policy practice to require certification for observers. There's a lot of political stuff here, and I have to confess, Teachscape is a tool company. We build software. We don't set policy, but it seems that, especially in areas where it's easy to cut corners to meet the law's requirements to do the observation. And one of the corners that could be cut is the quality of the observer training. And we strongly feel that observer certification is a good policy approach. Certification should be based on demonstrated skills, not by seat time. I mean, we are now sitting in classrooms observing teachers, and for the same reasons, we should be requiring evidence, demonstrated skills that the observer is effective as well. So this is not you've got to go to 5 days and get signed off. Scoring in a group we don't think is sufficient either in a face-to-face environment. We actually feel that a demonstrated assessment is the best defensible approach to rater certification. Teachscape, as I said, shows all of our training is online. But, you know, we're pragmatists when it comes to online training. We've been around for a long time. We've done a lot of online learning for school districts, and we know that when you pass out passwords, training doesn't always happen, and blended learning is really a much stronger approach. So we do encourage and advise people to blend online PD with face-to-face sessions. The way I would do it with our system is I would do an introductory day where we focus on how to use the tools and do bias training. Then I would do a day on Domain 2, framework, Danielson framework. So day 2 is all of the modules 2A, B, C, and D. Then I would do a face-to-face day on Domain 3, and we talk about all the elements in Domain 3. And then the homework is modules 3A, B, C, D. And then use a fourth day to practice scoring and focus on inter-rater reliability. So we encourage states and others that are rolling these things out to consider a blended approach. We're constantly asked, how often should principals be recertified? We honestly don't have an answer to that question. We suspect that it's annual will be best practice. However, you know, there's a big cost in recertifying principals annually. If there are tools to recalibrate on a regular basis, perhaps you can go to an every 2-year certification. Teachscape is actually one of the things that we've talked about is how do we build in tools that allow us to recalibrate with folks right inside of our observation technology. Scale is what leads to cost effectiveness. So There's a lot of states who, for a variety of reasons relative to local control, have said you can choose whatever framework you want, and we're not going to choose a statewide framework. The challenge there is if you've got 4 or 5 frameworks, some of the frameworks that have less market penetration or just sheer smaller numbers of volume that are being used, it's going to be harder to find tools and content and resources for rater certification. So that's a big issue. So if you allow everyone to choose their own, which may be necessary politically, just be aware that there's a cost that comes with that. As the 4th or 5th largest choices have just a few school districts, but yet require a fully customized training and certification program. So just something to think about. Defensibility is yet untested. We're ahead of the days when we will see lawsuits but not far ahead, I suspect, because some observer, well, we know it all the time now from job actions where teachers are trying to be released, that the big question is show us evidence. Well, now you've got the evidence, but now the next question will be is how qualified is the rater? And so what level of qualification will be necessary to dissuade a lawsuit? We think a certification exam is that's reputable, that's valid and reliable, will go a long way in enhancing defensibility, but we don't have any research on this as yet because the days are early. So it's something that we will be studying along with you. Other best practices, districts should consider double scoring periodically to avoid drift. By that I mean scoring in person, scoring with 2 people at the same time, could be scoring with video. You should shoot for a 5% or better double scoring as a practice. That seems to be the common practice used with state testing. 5 to 10% double scoring should provide you some confidence about rater drift and ensure that folks are staying true to their certification. And then, of course, where possible, we advise districts to use multiple evaluators. So to have 2 principals of similar sized buildings swap and to have that principal go observe the other teachers and other buildings and or mix it all up and have different principals in different buildings every day as part of that work seems to be another good way to help avoid bias and then not allow personal relationships that evaluators have inside the building to really cloud their ability to offer an uninflected evaluation of the teaching they're observing. So those are just some of our thoughts relative to lessons learned so far, and my goal has been to get through all of that in 30 minutes. And it looks like we've made it. So I'm going to kick it back to Corinne for question and answer.
Scott, thank you so much. I was seriously taking notes during your lessons learned, and for those of you who are also furiously taking notes, the slides are posted on our website, and we'll share the link during the break. And we are recording the session, so you can play it forward to get to those lessons learned if you missed any of Scott's really good ideas. So we're just going to turn it over to questions and hopefully lots of answers and discussion. If you have. Hopefully we can get a little back and forth here. We do have some technology to aid us in the Q&A. We have about 14 people on the line and in the webinar right now. There's a little raise your hand icon just below the participant box. It's a little hand. Oops. Nina just raised her hand and I can raise mine. Get these little pings. So if folks have questions, they can click on that icon and we'll start a queue. So we can open that up right now. I have some that I can ask, but I'm going to give a good teacher's pause here for at least a few seconds. Make sure your phone is not on mute. Looks like Jenny from AIR typed in a question. Jenny, you can unmute your phone and ask on the phone if you'd like. she asked on the chat, can you give us an estimate of A, how long it would take to contour Teachscape's online training and certification process for a state-specific model? So what's the ramp-up time? Looks like you're ready to jump in with the Danielson framework, but what's the ramp-up time for a new, like a state-specific model? And then there's a cost question, which I assume would vary.
Yeah, so the answer to that really isn't known yet. I'm imagining it would be 3 to 6 months to couture a new piece. Part of it is, the hardest part is, the part that takes the longest is to develop the new training. We don't have to shoot new video in the system, so we can use the exact same teaching. And then we would work with folks who have developed the framework to master score the videos. The challenging part is working then to recreate a new assessment. So costs will not be insignificant, just to customize, and a lot of it will depend on the volume of users. So the Danielson framework for teaching system that you're looking at, we sell at about $400 per evaluator, which includes the training, the scoring practice area, and the observation assessment, the performance test, I'm sorry. And so you would have customization fees in excess of that on top of it. So that would be the question. So if it was a fairly large state and almost everybody in the state was going to do it, it could be inexpensive by comparison to that price. If you are a small state and, a handful of districts, we're going to need a custom assessment. It's not likely to be cost effective.
Okay, thank you. I had a question. You were talking about this having collaborative reflection with the teachers and the principal or whoever their evaluator observer is, and you have a system for even scheduling in, it looked like, the pre and post conferences. Do you also provide training on how to conduct those, or is there a kind of a Danielson recommendation or format or protocol for the pre and post lesson conferences?
So the Danielson group does quite a bit of training on that, and Teachscape will be building some capacity around that as well. But for now, we've just referred to our partners in the Danielson group for that. And like I said, they have a series of workshops about how to collect evidence, without interpretation. And they also have some good feedback on how to do pre-conferences and post-conferences as well, and make them meaningful and effective. How to ask and use open-ended questions, how to get teachers to be more metacognitive about their practice, the kinds of do's and don'ts that principals can do that make it less threatening for a teacher to be more upfront and direct about the practice.
Great. Any other questions from those on the line? Okay, I have one more question, and just this relates to, I liked what you had to say about combining the web-based training and also kind of live training, and I wondered how that would fit into kind of building capacity within a state or within a large district to do that, either on their own or just the level of support kind of ease off over time. So are you training kind of lead trainers at the district that can maybe do the monitoring work during the year and lead the training the following summer? Have you guys thought about kind of building capacity within the districts and states to kind of take over some of that load?
So our model is all about building local capacity, and so we do a lot of train-the-trainer models or turnkey models, as Charlotte calls them in her group, and so the goal is always, where possible, to leave capacity in districts and states. So quite frequently, we will take a solution like this in, and people in regional centers or service units, ESDs will actually deliver their work. State teams will deliver the work, as well as folks. But generally, we try to do a very strong capacity building model along the way.
Great. And I see we have a question from Barbara Downs in New York, I think. Is that right? Barbara, can you unmute your phone?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's your question?
I wanted to know how many of, first of all, I guess it's two questions. First of all, how many of the 21 hours are done through the online format?
So the 21 references just the number of training hours in the modules. It doesn't include the scoring center or the time spent in the assessment in the test. So it is 21 hours of online study plus some variable hours. So some people who've got it will, so I imagine we will have some districts that might, for example, like in northern Illinois, where they've been using the Daniel framework for some time, they've already invested extensively in the training. They might actually have people who will skip the training and go straight to the scoring center. Just practice a few times in the scoring center, see how they do, and then cut over to the assessment. Others will need to begin and do all 21 hours and may actually enrich it with the base as well. Some number of hours should be spent in the scoring practice center. Those videos are 15 to 30 minutes long, and so they take a while to work your way through, and you've got at least 5 to start with, but more over time as you work through those. So, but the 21 hours refers to just the number of hours in the online training module.
Okay, and so I have a follow-up question to that, and maybe you answered it in your response, and that is, how do you ensure reliability using the online format?
So the online format, then you're going to practice score, so you're going to get feedback on how you did practice scoring, and then you switch to the test. So the test actually is the ultimate measure of performance, right? So that's the way we know that you can, and districts, so in New York, where the law says the principals have to be certified, they have to be certified on several things. This covers 4 or 5 of the required 9 state objectives for which they have to be certified, and then the superintendent signs off on that certification. So that's the way it works in New York. I think they said you were from New York, Barbara. So that's our approach to it for New York State. So the test is actually the way to answer your question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from folks on the line for Scott? Okay, well, you see his contact information is on the screen if you want to follow up directly.